My name is Tessa Asquith-Lamb and I'm an artist and art educator. In today's lecture, Tokens of Festive Magic, we're going to be having a look at some of my collection of Victorian and later Christmas ephemera and decorations, and also we're talking about how I use those decorations and Christmas objects in some of my artwork and etchings. Christmas has always been one of my favourite times of year, and like many people, I've got things in my collection that belong to family members and also things that I've collected over the years. And I love thinking about what those things say about the people who owned them a long time ago, maybe what they were interested in, and how those things have got this real charm about them and real beauty. And that's why I use them in my artwork. They have a kind of optimism and hope about them, and a kind of real sort of glitter and magic about them in a way. So without further ado, we're going to look at some of those objects by type, and I'll tell you a little bit about their history and just show you some really nice examples. The first objects I'm going to describe are Christmas cards. The earliest Christmas card is generally agreed to be the one designed in 1843 by John Calcutt Horsley at the suggestion of Sir Henry Cole, who was founding director of the Victorian Albert Museum. Fewer than 1,000 cards were sold at £1 each, which was very expensive at the time, and showed a family toasting a Merry Christmas around a festive table, with panels to each side showing acts of charity. Cole had been instrumental in helping to set up the introduction of the penny post in 1840, and this made sending cards much more affordable, and they really took off as part of Christmas celebrations. The designs becoming more complex, incorporating paper lace, moving parts, and also reflecting current fashions. Now sadly, I don't own one of those very early Christmas cards, but I do have some from the 19th century and early 20th century that I can show you. So the first one I'm going to show you is got a little design on the front of it of two little girls under a green umbrella with a sprinkling of snow at the top of it, and they're attached by a paper tab to a background of beautiful cut paper lace that would have been stamped out. It's really delicate. Paper lace like this was used on Valentine cards, so it wasn't really a new thing, but it was really popular at the time, and they could become really embellished with that added sort of lace and ribbons and even sometimes dried flowers. But this one's got a lovely kind of 3D effect and just says compliments of the season underneath it. A much more complicated Victorian card is this one, which is a fascinating mechanical card. When you grip the bottom of the oval of flowers and pull the tab at the top, the little cherubs at the top rise up, and a picture is revealed of two children making garlands, and little poems are written on two side tabs, and it says, "Here's Christmas come again, I trust you'll happy be, and many sweet returns be privileged to see, to my friend." And it's a really kind of wonderful little bit of paper engineering that's survived, and things like this would be kept really carefully, and sometimes you find them in old albums. A slightly later mechanical card is a postcard here, and this was made by the Milton Postcard Company, and I've been able to date this one to 1908. And there's a tab at the side, and it's quite a simple mechanism. It just says a bright Xmas, and then when you pull the little tab it says and New Year. And again, this is quite a strange design because there's quite summery, sort of almost spring flowers on this one, but it's quite an odd design of pink daffodils. I don't know if pink daffodils exist, but they do in this card. Another card that's quite unusual in my collection is actually made in New Zealand, and it shows the ponga fern, and it says underneath the canopy of the fern, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas." And this is a chromolithograph card from 1885, and it was made by Archibald Duddingston Willis, the firm of Wanganui, and this reflects the craze in the sort of 1840s to 1890s for collecting ferns and being fascinated by ferns. So this is a really unusual Christmas card that's come all the way from New Zealand. Another craze in the 19th century was conchology, or collecting shells. Again, quite an unusual subject for a Christmas card. Here's two quite ordinary looking shells and a piece of seaweed on the shape of an artist's palette, and at the top a little bit of paper lace. And it says, "A Happy Christmas." And they've been sprinkled with a little bit of mica glitter, or it may be kind of crushed glass glitter at the top, and that just gives them a lovely kind of sheen. That's quite an unusual one that reflects the kind of collecting shells craze. Another craze here, and this is a lady cyclist on this lovely embossed card here, and she's very sort of dashingly swooshing along on her bicycle here in this very narrow waisted dress and big shoulders, and she's got a sort of quite sensible hat on and ribbons flowing out behind her on her bike. So it's a lovely kind of reflection of a new hobby that was available to women at that time, which was going out cycling, which gave you a bit of freedom. So it's a really nice little sort of turn of the century card, I'd say, that one. This is an American card. This one says, with loving Christmas wishes, may Christmas morn be bright for you. And it shows kind of idealised little cottages. And again, it's been sprinkled with glitter. And some firms would put kind of silvery paint on top of their cards so that they had a lovely sheen to them. And people would really collect these cards and keep them for ages and bring them out every year. The next set of cards are all these small Edwardian ones, and we'll just run through a few of them. There's a design of some little golden birds on a branch, which is embossed. There's a little Xmas one with a moon, which when you open it up inside has got really lovely embossed lettering inside it. There's a really lovely embossed card with a design of kind of ivy and flowers, really beautifully pierced card. And then to prove that bad jokes and kind of puns never really change, there's my last card I'm going to show you is a card with a bad pun on it. So it says, I hope you will turn up this Christmas and let us be merry together, with a T-urn on it instead of the word urn. The next objects I'm going to show you are Christmas crackers. The ones in this image are probably from the early 20th century, the red ones. And they've got very sort of sweet little Edwardian ladies in kind of lovely black and white images on the middle bands of them. And they're made out of red crepe paper with gilt paper and then some fringing at the ends. And the other slightly more brightly coloured crackers, they probably date from the sort of 1930s, 1940s. These traditional Christmas dinner accompaniments were invented in 1847 when confectioner Tom Smith of London added love messages to the twisted paper wrappings of his bonbon sweets. He added the crack after apparently hearing a log on the fire crackle, inspiring the banger strip or snap. Traditional day, of course, include a trinket, a terrible joke or motto, and of course a paper hat. Some people believe the wearing of crowns at Christmas may relate to the Roman Saturnalia festival or ancient feasts when all wore disguises and anyone could be king. Now I bet you're wondering what's in these crackers. Now I can't get into the red ones because they're too tightly kind of twisted up and I haven't got the heart to have a look inside them, but the 1930s ones are kind of open at the back, so I've had a look inside them. And they've got, instead of jokes, they've got kind of mottos or sayings like, make the most of yourself, for that is all there is of you. And don't carry your wishbone where your backbone ought to be. And they've got tiny little metal or wooden charms, little horses, little dog, little spinning top. And then the interesting thing that I found was that the hats are actually shaped a bit like a kind of army kind of cap, or maybe like Robin Hood's hat, and they've just got a little tiny bit of metal decoration. So they're quite basic, but they're really different to the hats that we've got today. So I thought that was quite interesting. Now let's move on to the Christmas tree itself. Although Prince Albert is credited with introducing the idea of the Christmas tree to the public in the 1840s, and in 1848 a depiction of the royal tree in the press really fascinated everyone, in reality decorated trees had been in use for many decades, often adorned with uplifting mottos and flowers made from cut paper. They were used for the distribution of gifts. I suppose today we think about just sort of hanging decorations on them, but definitely in the 19th century you would kind of take things off the tree and give them to people as presents. And often those were in the form of decorated boxes full of sweets or little toys. And I've got something here that's a very rare survival of one of those Victorian boxes made of painted and turned wood, gilded with ivy. I wonder what it contained originally. I now keep a little toy robin inside it. If you wanted to make your own little gifts, publications like Castle's Household Guide provided instructions for making things like these. The Lucky Shoe, which the guide tells you to fill with scented wadding or sugar plums before hiding a ring inside it. And then the idea was that everybody at the party would be given one of these shoes off the tree, and the person that found the ring in their shoe would be the first person to marry. This is a little pin holder, which is also from those same instructions. And it's in the form of a guitar, and all the pins go around the edges of it. So it's really kind of decorative object and will look very sweet hanging on the tree. This is another thing that we've made in Lauriston workshops in the past, based on these Victorian examples. Now, Charles Dickens tells in great detail of a Christmas tree in a piece that he wrote in Household Words in 1854. And he really goes into great detail about all the things that are on this Christmas tree. And he includes fortune-telling dolls in that. And I've got one of these fortune-telling dolls here that, again, I've kind of replicated from one of these Victorian examples. Now, the Victorian ones often have loads of different little papers around the skirt. And the idea was that you picked a number or picked a paper off her skirt and read it. So I'll pick one just now. What's it say? You will find a lost treasure. So that's always good. So this is a little fortune-telling doll. Now, to light the tree, for many years, candles were used, despite the danger of this. And of course, it really was a danger. If you've got a lit flame next to all these kind of dry paper decorations and all these little bits of dry wood and all these really quite dangerous things. But all these depictions you see on Christmas cards always show them lit. In reality, they were probably only lit for a very short period of time during the gift-giving sort of ceremony that would happen, especially in big houses. And there's tales of having a footman on standby in big houses with a wet sponge on a stick to put out the candles if they got out of control. So this is a really rare survival of a box of Christmas tree candles, and you can see the little tin clips inside for clipping them on the tree, and they come in different colours, some short, some slightly longer. Now, of course, no tree would be complete without its beautiful glass Christmas tree ornaments or baubles. And most of the surviving glass baubles today from the 19th century were made in quite a sort of specific region called the Thuringian region of Germany. German manufacturers held sway until the 20th century when cheaper products made in Japan flooded the market. The moulded or blown glass was silvered in early examples with lead swirled on the inside of the bauble, but this was later replaced with silver nitrate mirroring. It can be difficult to date old glass decorations, but sometimes the hanging clips or mounts can help. And I'm going to show you a few of my favourite ones here. Now, I've been collecting these for a long time and they're so fragile and you've got to be really, really careful with them. And I've got a few where I've had to just do slight repairs on them and just look after them really, really carefully. But some of the rarest ones I've got are a set of little glass bugles, and these were probably made in the Lauschka region of Germany around 1900. And these really beautiful kind of shapes in kind of greens and silvers, and then some of them have got little hand-painted decorations, and they would just be dangled on the tree. And musical instruments are always quite popular as Christmas tree decorations. Now, my real favourites are the glass birds. And the pink and silver ones here are what I had on my tree when I was little, so I've got a special fondness for those. But little glass birds in these kind of moulded shapes and then coloured, and they've got little spun glass tails, were really, really popular. And they date from about 1905 onwards, but they're still being produced today. And one of the ways you can date them is if you have a look at the clips, if they've got quite a really old clip that's maybe gone a bit rusty or, you know, is less shiny. It's one of the ways you can really tell how old they are. And these spun glass tails are quite fragile as well, and sometimes they lose their little spun glass tails. Another really rare thing I've got is this swan, which is silver and blue, and he's got a spun glass tail, and he's quite good because you can kind of hook him over a branch with his beak. I have a feeling that he was probably had legs at one point because there's some little dimples underneath his body, but I'm not sure what happened to those. Maybe he was part of a tree topper, which sometimes happened. They had quite elaborate glass bird tree toppers. Now, some other decorations here, more traditional kind of baubles, some have these kind of pushed in designs, kind of prismatic designs, and these are slightly later. And they really reflect the light from Christmas tree lights. They're really kind of brightly coloured, and they're often decorated with a little bit of hand painting. And there's other ones which are kind of moulded to look like kind of fruit shapes, and these are often quite early, and these are known as paradise fruits. And sometimes these also have glitter on them. And the most valuable and kind of sought after ones are the ones that are shaped like actual creatures, maybe a little cat, a bird, or sometimes you get a little Santa or a dog, and those are the rarest ones. But it's lovely to build up a collection of these whenever you can find them. The final group of objects I'd like to show you are sort of mid-century and slightly later objects, but they're just as redolent and just as evocative, I think. Especially those very thin pieces of wrapping paper that you can see in this picture. And they're the ultimate piece of ephemera, really, because they're destined to be kind of ripped off a present in the 1970s and thrown away. But somehow these three little pieces have survived. And that thin paper and the crinkly noise it makes are really kind of evocative for me. They remind me of Christmas morning. There's some little tags there and some of those folding paper Christmas decorations that you might remember. And these are probably from the sort of 1950s, 1960s. And then there's also a really interesting little box of twisted and kind of coiled metal icicles called tree icicles. And these must have been something that didn't really catch on. They're probably from the 1950s or 1960s. So it's worth having a look through your old boxes of Christmas trimmings and just seeing what you've got kind of lurking in there. And they really act as kind of little memory triggers for me, these kind of things. And I just thought you'd enjoy seeing some more recent things, as well as these really, really beautiful 19th century and earlier items. So before I show you a couple of my etchings, I'm going to bring in these two little fairy dolls here. So these are mid-century, maybe a little bit earlier for this one. And she's got really kind of articulated legs, and she's wearing sort of silver lame costume, and she's got her wand there, and she's got lovely kind of mohair hair that's got a plait. And then this is one that many people will remember. These are kind of from the 60s, and some of these were made by Airfix, who made like the model kits. So you might remember having something a little bit like this one. But fairies or angels, depending on I suppose what kind of wings they are and your reading of them, are always something that kind of vie for what's going on the top of the tree with a star or maybe a fairy. But everybody's always got their favourite one. So I don't know if you've got a favourite one at home that you could remember always having, or you might have a new one that's become like an antique of the future. But I just thought I'd show you these couple of ones from my collection. So just to conclude this lecture, I'd like to show you a couple of my etchings. I've been a huge fan of etching, and it's a huge part of my artistic practice ever since I was at Edinburgh College of Art. It's been one of my favourite ways to make artwork. These two etchings I'm about to show you are all etched on zinc and printed in limited editions. And the first one is a shaped zinc plate, nearly A1 in size, that's used to print an image called Thought Birds. So this is printed in a lovely kind of soft brown ink, and it's a self-portrait. So I'm looking to the side like this, and I'm making a shadow hand bird like this, and the bird's shadow is turning into real birds above me. But you can see that the fox that appears in a lot of my etchings, Reynard, down at the bottom, he's holding a branch covered in these little glass Christmas tree birds. So they had their little moment in this print. So the glass birds and the real birds existing in that print together, about thoughts kind of flying off. The second etching I'd like to show you is called Fair Thoughts for Rainy Days. Now, I don't just put Christmas things in my prints, lots of other things from my collection have kind of a second life and a second meaning from their original purpose, and they're used in this way to create new kind of meanings in my own artwork. And in this picture, the little crescent moon and the star from this Christmas card appear in the top corner of this image. And I like to feel that there's a kind of relationship between that moon and the star, and that they've got this really kind of magical feeling in that corner of the print. So sometimes it's quite subtle how I use the things in my prints, but they're there sometimes. So I hope you've enjoyed this little look through Christmas past with me today, and that you'll have a look through your old Christmas decorations next time you get them down from the loft, and find your own tokens of festive magic.